Station Veritas floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. 12 different alien species lived and worked together on this massive structure. Ships came and went every hour, bringing scientists, traders, and curious visitors from across the galaxy. But everyone who came to Station Veritas wanted to see one thing above all else: the ship that would not wake up. The Eternal Dawn sat in the center of the station's largest dock. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The ship was 3 times bigger than any warship the galaxy had ever seen. Its hull was made from a metal that seemed to change color when you looked at it from different angles. Sometimes it looked silver, sometimes gold, sometimes like the darkness of space itself. Strange symbols covered every surface, flowing like water across the metal. The ship had been there for 300 years. Nobody knew where it came from, not really. The history books said it belonged to the architects, a species that vanished long before any of the current galactic powers rose to importance. The architects left behind ruins on 100 worlds, but never any bodies, never any clear answers about where they went or why. And they left behind ships like the Eternal Dawn, perfect, untouchable, dead. Thousands of scientists had tried to activate the ship. The Valkyrie, with their 6 arms and computer-like minds, had run every calculation possible. The Ashrim, who could read thoughts and feel emotions across vast distances, had tried to connect with whatever intelligence might sleep inside. The Morath, who could see in 4 dimensions and perceive time differently than other species, had searched for activation sequences in the flow of causality itself. Nothing worked. The ship sat silent and still, its doors sealed, its systems offline. It was the greatest mystery in the known galaxy. Tai Yang had heard about the Eternal Dawn, of course. Everyone had. But he never thought he would see it in person. He was just an engineer from one of Earth's outer colonies, a human who fixed broken machines and kept old systems running. When the Cultural Exchange Program selected him to spend 6 months on Station Veritas, he nearly fell over in shock. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had only made contact with alien species 40 years ago. Most of the older, more established species looked at humans the way you might look at a child who just learned to walk. Interesting, perhaps. Cute, maybe. But not important. Not really. Taeyang's shuttle docked at Station Veritas on a Tuesday morning, station time. He grabbed his single bag of belongings and made his way through the airlock. The station's main corridor stretched out before him, so large that small aircraft flew through it to carry passengers from one section to another. Aliens of every shape and size walked, slithered, and floated past him. Some had scales, some had fur, some had skin that looked like living crystal. A few nodded at him politely. Most ignored him completely. His assignment papers directed him to Section 7, the research wing. When he arrived, a Valkyrie scientist named Vorath was waiting for him. Vorath stood nearly 3 meters tall, with gray skin and 6 arms that never seemed to stop moving. 2 arms held data tablets, 2 were typing on holographic keyboards, and 2 gestured as he spoke. "You are the human," Vorath said. It was not a question. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "You will work in the archives. We need someone to organize 3 centuries of failed activation attempts for the Eternal Dawn project. It is simple work, boring work, but it must be done." Taeyang felt his excitement drain away. He had hoped to work on actual research, maybe even get to touch some of the amazing technology on the station. Instead, he would be filing reports. "I understand," he said quietly. Vorath's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Good. The archives are on level 12. Begin tomorrow. For today, you may explore the station. Many humans enjoy visiting the observation decks." The way he said it made it clear he thought this was a waste of time. Taeyang found his quarters, a small room barely big enough for a bed and a desk. He dropped his bag and stood there for a moment, feeling very far from home. Then he decided Vorath was right about one thing. He should explore. He spent the afternoon walking through the station's public areas. He saw laboratories where scientists studied particles he could not even pronounce. He saw gardens growing under artificial suns, filled with plants from a dozen worlds. He saw markets where traders sold things he could not identify and did not understand. And then, as evening approached by the station's clock, he found himself in the main dock. The eternal dawn filled his vision. Up close, it was even more impressive than the pictures he had seen. The ship seemed to pulse with potential energy, like a storm waiting to break. Taiyang walked closer, drawn by something he could not name. Warning signs in multiple languages told him not to approach. Security barriers kept visitors at least 50 meters away. But one of the barriers had a malfunction, a gap just wide enough for a person to slip through. Taiyang looked around. No guards were nearby. The dock was quiet in the evening hours. He knew he should not do it. He knew he should follow the rules. He slipped through the gap anyway. His footsteps echoed on the dock floor as he approached the ship. His heart hammered in his chest. At any moment, someone might yell at him to stop, but nobody did. He reached the hull and stood there, staring up at the massive vessel. This close, he could see the symbols moving slowly across the surface, never quite staying in the same pattern. Taiyang reached out. He did not really think about it. He just wanted to touch something the architects had made, to connect with that lost civilization for just one moment. His hand touched the hull. The entire ship blazed with light. Every window, every panel, every symbol suddenly glowed with a brilliant blue-white radiance. Taiyang jumped back, his hand leaving the metal, his eyes wide with shock. Alarms began screaming throughout the station. The light from the ship was so bright he had to shield his eyes. Within seconds, security drones surrounded him. A voice over the station's speakers demanded he put his hands up and not move. Taiyang obeyed, his mind racing, his heart threatening to break through his ribs. The ship's light faded slowly, returning to its usual dormant state. But Taiyang could see that some of the exterior panels still glowed faintly, a soft pulse like a heartbeat. Vorath arrived within minutes, all 6 arms gesturing frantically. Behind him came a dozen scientists from various species, all talking at once. They surrounded Taiyang, asking questions, taking readings, arguing about what had just happened. For 300 years, the eternal dawn had been completely silent, and now, after one human touched it, the ship had woken up. Just for a moment, just for a heartbeat. But it had woken up. Taiyang stood there with security drones pointed at him, scientists shouting around him, and one thought kept running through his mind. What did I just do? They put Taiyang in a small room with white walls and no windows. It was not exactly a prison cell, but it was close enough. 2 security drones hovered outside the door, and a Valkyrie guard stood watch in the hallway. Taiyang sat on the hard bench and tried to understand what was happening. Hours passed. Nobody came to speak with him. Through the door, he could hear voices arguing, but he could not make out the words. His stomach growled with hunger, but nobody brought food. He was starting to think they had forgotten about him when the door finally opened. A human woman walked in. She was small and thin, with short black hair and tired eyes behind round glasses. She carried a data tablet and looked angry enough to bite through steel. "My name is Hana," she said without introduction. "I am a xenolinguist. That means I study alien languages, and I am very, very upset right now." Taiyang blinked. "Why?" "Because they are treating you like a criminal when you just made the most important discovery in 300 years, Hana said. She sat down across from him and pulled up files on her tablet. "Do you know what happened after you touched that ship? Every single sensor on the station went active. The Eternal Dawn responded to you, Taiyang. It woke up for a human." "But I did not do anything special," Taiyang said. I just touched it. That is exactly my point. Hana leaned forward. Thousands of people have studied that ship. The greatest minds in the galaxy have tried everything to activate it. And then you, a human who just arrived today, walk up and put your hand on the hull and the whole thing lights up like a star. That is not a coincidence. Before Taeyang could respond, the door opened again. Vorath entered, followed by 3 other high-ranking station officials. The Valkyrie scientist looked at Hana with disapproval. You should not be here. This human is under investigation. For what crime? Hana demanded. Walking? Touching? Being human? Vorath's 4 eyes narrowed. For potentially activating an ancient weapon that could destroy this station and everyone on it. Or potentially giving us the key to the greatest mystery in galactic history, Hana shot back. You are scared, I understand that, but punishing him for an accident is stupid and wasteful. The two stared at each other. Finally, one of the other officials, a tall Ashream with purple skin and 3 eyes, spoke in a calm voice. We have analyzed the data from the incident. The ship's response was brief but definite. We detected power fluctuations throughout the vessel. Some systems came partially online before shutting down again. We need to understand why this happened. We need the human to approach the ship again. Vorath made a sound like grinding metal. That is too dangerous. Doing nothing is more dangerous, the Ashram said. This is our first real progress in 3 centuries. We must continue the research, but carefully. Guards will surround the human. Shields will be raised. Every safety measure will be in place. But we must try. They argued for another 10 minutes. Hana argued alongside the Ashram, using logic and passion in equal measure. Finally, Vorath gave in, though he clearly hated the decision. Fine. But if anything goes wrong, we stop immediately, and the human signs documents accepting all risks. I will do it, Taeyang said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. I want to understand what happened too. I will be careful. I promise. They brought him back to the main dock 2 hours later. The entire area had been transformed. Portable shield generators surrounded the Eternal Dawn. Medical teams stood ready. Scientists from every department crowded behind safety barriers, their instruments pointed at the ship. Taeyang felt like an actor on a stage, with everyone watching his performance. Hana walked beside him. She had insisted on being there, arguing that as a human, she might provide useful observations. Vorath had allowed it, though he kept muttering about humans and their emotional attachments. Are you scared? Hana asked quietly as they approached the ship. Very, Taeyang admitted. What if I break something? What if the ship explodes? What if you change the galaxy? Hana interrupted. That is possible too. Try to think about that instead. They reached the security perimeter. The guards stepped aside, letting Taeyang pass through alone. He walked toward the Eternal Dawn, his footsteps slow and hesitant. The ship looked exactly as it had before, quiet and waiting. When he was close enough, he reached out again, his hand trembling slightly. His fingers touched the hull. Light blazed across the surface, exactly as before. But this time, Taeyang kept his hand in place, fighting the urge to pull back. The metal under his palm felt warm, almost alive. The symbols flowing across the hull moved faster, swirling around his hand like water around a stone in a stream. Then, something new happened. A section of the hull, perfectly smooth just moments before, split open. A doorway formed where none had existed. Soft blue light spilled out from inside. Taeyang heard gasps and exclamations from the watching scientists. Impossible, Vorath whispered, his voice carrying across the silent dock. In 300 years, we never found a door. Never. Taeyang looked back at Hana. She nodded at him, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. He turned back to the doorway and stepped inside. The interior of the ship was nothing like he expected. The hallway beyond the door seemed to stretch impossibly far, as if the ship was much larger inside than outside. The walls glowed with soft light that came from everywhere and nowhere. Symbols covered every surface, moving and shifting in patterns that hurt to watch for too long. Hannah followed him in, and several brave scientists came after her, including Vorath. Their instruments went crazy, beeping and flashing as they tried to record everything at once. But Taeyang barely noticed them. He felt drawn forward, pulled toward something deeper in the ship. They walked for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The ship's interior architecture made no sense. Hallways branched in directions that should not exist. Rooms opened into spaces that seemed bigger than the entire ship. Gravity shifted and changed, sometimes pulling them to the floor, sometimes to the walls. Finally, they reached a large chamber at what Taeyang somehow knew was the center of the ship. In the middle of the room stood a crystal pillar, taller than a person, pulsing with inner light. As Taeyang approached it, the pillar's light grew brighter. Then a hologram appeared above the crystal. It was not an image of an architect. Nobody knew what architects looked like. Instead, the hologram showed symbols, hundreds of them, flowing and changing, and beneath the symbols, a single question mark. Hannah moved forward immediately, her scanner working furiously. "It is a test," she said, her voice shaking with excitement. "Some kind of puzzle or challenge. But the symbols, they are not in any language I have ever seen. They are not really a language at all." "Then what are they?" Vorath demanded. Hannah studied the hologram for a long moment. I think they are a logic puzzle, but not the kind that follows normal rules. Look here." She pointed at a sequence. "This pattern suggests one solution, but then it breaks its own rules and suggests something completely different. It is like the puzzle is designed to contradict itself." "That makes no sense," Vorath said. "A logical puzzle must follow consistent rules." "Unless it is testing for something other than pure logic," Hannah said slowly. She looked at Taeyang. "Try solving it. Do not think too hard. Just feel what the answer should be." Taeyang stared at the symbols. She was right. When he tried to analyze them logically, they made no sense. But when he just looked at them, let his mind wander. Something clicked. He saw patterns that were not really there. He felt connections that logic would deny. His hand moved almost on its own, reaching out to touch certain symbols in a sequence that felt right even though he could not explain why. The hologram shifted and changed with each touch. Some symbols disappeared. Others grew brighter. Vorath and the other scientists watched in silent amazement as Taeyang worked through the puzzle, not by calculation, but by intuition, by guessing, by making leaps that made no logical sense. After 10 minutes, he touched the final symbol. The hologram flashed once, bright and clear, and then dissolved. The crystal pillar pulsed 3 times. A voice filled the chamber. It spoke in perfect Korean, though Taeyang somehow knew it could speak any language needed. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. "Verification complete. Chaos-adapted species confirmed. Welcome, inheritor." The chamber filled with light. Systems all around the ship activated at once. The scientists' instruments overloaded and shut down from the sheer amount of data. Through the walls, through the floor, Taeyang could feel the ship waking up. Really waking up this time, 300 years of sleep ending in a single moment. "What does it mean, chaos adapted?" Hannah asked the voice. "The architects designed this vessel for a species capable of thriving in unpredictability," the voice answered. "A species that uses imagination as well as logic. A species that can see patterns where none exist and find solutions where none seem possible. Humanity possesses the chaos factor in abundance. You are the inheritors we have waited for." Vorath's 6 arms had frozen in mid-gesture. His 4 eyes were wider than Taiyang had ever seen them. "Impossible," the Valkyrie whispered. "This ship was meant for humans? A species barely 40 years into galactic contact?" "Not just this ship," the voice said. "All architect vessels, all architect technology, all our inheritance. We left it for a species that thinks differently. A species that can use creativity where we used perfection." The crystal pillar's light grew brighter, washing over them all. Taiyang stood there, his mind struggling to understand what was happening. All of this, all the architect ruins and technology scattered across the galaxy, had been waiting. Waiting for humans. Waiting for him. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The Eternal Dawn had activated. A human had awakened a ship that had been silent for 3 centuries. Every news network, every scientific institution, every government wanted to know more. Messages flooded into Station Veritas by the thousands. Taiyang barely noticed. He spent the next 3 days inside the ship, barely sleeping, barely eating. The ship's AI, which asked to be called simply Dawn, guided him through the vessel's systems. Every room revealed new wonders. Every hallway held new mysteries. But Dawn made one thing very clear. The ship would not fully activate until Taiyang completed what it called the inheritance test. "I do not understand," Taiyang said on the 3rd day, standing again in the central chamber. "You have already activated. You are talking to me. What more do you need?" "I am awake," Dawn replied, its voice patient and calm. "But I am not alive, not fully. The architects designed their vessels to bond with their crews, to become extensions of their users. But this requires trust. The inheritance test proves you can use our technology not just safely, but well. And if I fail, then I will sleep again and wait for another human to find me. Perhaps in another 100 years. Perhaps in 1,000. Dawn's voice held no judgment, only fact. "But I do not believe you will fail, Taiyang. You solved the first puzzle. That was not luck." Vorath and the station officials wanted to send a large team aboard for the test. Scientists from every species volunteered, eager to study architect technology up close. But when they tried to enter the ship, Dawn's doors would not open for them. The ship would only accept humans aboard. This caused another wave of arguments and debates. Some species felt insulted. Others were suspicious. A few seemed almost relieved, happy to let humans take the risk of testing ancient, unpredictable technology. In the end, the decision was simple. Only humans could take the test, so only humans would go. Taiyang needed a crew. He could not operate a massive warship alone. Hana volunteered immediately, insisting that a linguist might be useful for communicating with the ship's systems. "Besides," she said with a tired smile, "someone needs to document this for the history books. Might as well be me." The call went out through human channels. Within a day, 3 more volunteers arrived at the station. Taiyang met them in a small briefing room, feeling nervous and inadequate. What did he know about choosing a crew? He was just an engineer who fixed broken things. The first to introduce herself was Jiwan. She was a shuttle pilot from the Mars colonies, short and stocky with a sharp, confident smile. "I have been flying since I was 16, she said. "Small ships, big ships, anything with an engine. I heard you need someone who can handle the controls. And I am the best you will find." She said it without arrogance, just stating a fact. Taiyang liked her immediately. The second volunteer was Doyun, a combat medic from Earth's military. He was tall and thin, with a dry sense of humor and hands that never seemed to stop moving, always fidgeting with something. "I have worked in field hospitals, on ships, in emergency situations where we had no supplies and no time," he said. "If something goes wrong on your test, you will want someone who can improvise medical solutions. That is me. The third was Suman, barely 20 years old, fresh from university with a degree in astrophysics. She looked terrified and excited at the same time. I know I am young, she said quickly. I know I have no real experience, but I have studied the architects my entire life. I have read every paper, every theory, every scrap of information we have about them. I can help understand what they left behind. Please let me try. Taeyang looked at his crew. A pilot, a medic, a scientist, a linguist, and himself. 5 humans who would attempt something no one had done before. Okay, he said. Let us do this together. They entered the eternal dawn the next morning. Dawn greeted them warmly, opening corridors and chambers that had remained sealed even after the initial activation. The ship seemed to respond to the presence of a full crew, coming more alive with each person who stepped aboard. The first test will begin shortly, Dawn announced as they gathered in the central chamber. You will need to navigate an asteroid field using the ship's manual controls. The field is simulated, but the challenge is real. The patterns will shift constantly. Adaptation is essential. Jiwon cracked her knuckles. I can do that. Where are the controls? Dawn guided them to the bridge, a vast room filled with holographic displays and interfaces that looked nothing like any human ship. Jiwon sat in the pilot's chair, her hands hovering over controls she did not recognize. This is going to be interesting, she muttered. The simulation began. The view screen showed an asteroid field, dense and dangerous. Jiwon's hands moved over the controls, slowly at first, learning how the ship responded. The eternal dawn moved forward into the field, and immediately asteroids began shifting position, changing speed, altering trajectories in ways that made no sense. That is impossible, Sumin said, watching the patterns. Asteroids do not move like that. There is no gravitational source that would cause those shifts. It is a test, not a physics lesson, Jiwon said through gritted teeth. Her hands moved faster now, but she was struggling. Every time she calculated a path through the field, the asteroids moved before she could reach them. The ship took several glancing blows, alarms sounding each time. Stop trying to calculate, Hana said suddenly. Remember what Dawn said. This tests adaptation. Feel the pattern. Do not think about it. Jiwon closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, something had changed in her expression. Her hands moved differently, not following calculations, but following instinct. She stopped trying to predict where the asteroids would be and started responding to where they were. The ship danced through the field, twisting and turning in ways that made Taeyang's stomach lurch. They made it through. Jiwon let out a long breath and slumped in her chair. That was insane. I broke every rule of safe piloting I ever learned. And it worked, Dawn said with something like approval in its voice. Test 1 complete. The second test came hours later, after they had all rested and eaten from the ship's surprisingly well-stocked food synthesizers. Dawn led them to the engineering section, a vast space filled with systems and machinery that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed partially in dimensions human eyes could not quite see. Something is broken, Dawn announced. You must repair it, but the instructions are incomplete, and you do not have the correct tools. Improvise. Do-yoon stepped forward, examining the damaged system. It was a power relay of some kind, but the technology was beyond anything he had seen. Sparks flew from broken connections. Fluids leaked from cracked tubes. The instruction manual that Dawn provided was missing half its pages, and the tools available did not fit the connectors. This is a medical test disguised as an engineering problem, Doyen said, studying the damage. You want to see if I can patch something together with wrong tools and incomplete information, like field surgery. Correct, Dawn said. Doyen worked for over an hour, using tools in ways they were not designed for, bypassing broken systems, creating temporary connections with materials that should not work, but somehow did. Taeyang helped where he could, but this was Do-yoon's test. The medic's hands were steady and sure, his face calm even when problems multiplied. Finally, the system sparked once and came back online. It was not a perfect repair. A proper engineer with the right tools could have done better, but it worked, and that was what mattered. Test 2 complete, Dawn announced. The third test was for Suman. Dawn brought them to what looked like a library, though instead of books, the shelves held crystals that glowed with stored information. The architects vanished, Dawn said. Every species in the galaxy has theories about why, but theories are not truth. Tell me what actually happened to my creators. Suman looked terrified. How can I possibly know that? Nobody knows that. It is the greatest mystery in galactic history. Use what you know, Hana encouraged. Think about everything you have studied. Suman paced back and forth, muttering to herself. She pulled up data files, read through architect ruins surveys, studied the ship's systems. Hours passed. The others sat quietly, letting her work through the problem. Finally, she spoke. They did not die. Everyone assumes the architects died out, but there is no evidence of that. No mass graves, no records of plague or war, nothing. What if they did not die? What if they evolved beyond needing physical bodies, beyond needing ships and tools and technology? Continue, Dawn said, its voice somehow eager. The architects were masters of their universe, Suman said, her words coming faster now. They could do anything, build anything. Maybe that was the problem. When you can do everything perfectly, what is left? What challenge remains? So they left, not to another place, but to another state of being. And they left their tools behind for species who still needed them, for species that think differently, for species with the chaos factor, Dawn finished. You understand. The architects did not die. They transcended, and they knew that beings like themselves, perfection seekers, would never truly use their gifts well. But beings like humans, who embrace imperfection and uncertainty, you would find ways to use our technology that we never imagined. Light flooded the chamber. Throughout the ship, systems came fully online. Weapons, shields, engines, sensors, everything activated at once. The eternal dawn was no longer just awake. It was alive. Truly alive. All tests complete, Dawn said. Inheritance accepted. This vessel is yours, Taeyang, yours and your crew's. I am at your command. Taeyang stood there, feeling the ship humming with power around him. Outside, on Station Veritas, alarms were probably going off. Scientists were probably panicking, and somewhere far away, someone would be watching with great interest, someone who would want this ship for themselves. The signal went out the moment the Eternal Dawn fully activated. It was not something Dawn intended to send. The ship's awakening simply created an energy pulse that radiated across the galaxy, announcing to anyone listening that architect technology had come online after 3 centuries of silence. In the Dominion, 40 systems away, War Master Krell received the signal within hours. He was a Tharn, a species of intelligent reptiles who had conquered their way across space through superior strategy and overwhelming force. Krell stood nearly 4 meters tall, with scales like black armor and eyes that calculated odds faster than most computers. He had never lost a battle. He studied the report about Station Veritas and the human who had activated an architect warship. Humans. Krell knew about them, barely. A young species, weak, scattered across a few dozen colonies. They had no great fleet, no powerful weapons, no real military tradition. And yet they had somehow claimed the most powerful ship in the galaxy. Unacceptable. Krell assembled his fleet. 20 warships, the finest the Dominion had built. Enough firepower to reduce a planet to dust. He sent a message ahead to Station Veritas. The eternal dawn belongs to the Dominion by right of strength. Prepare to transfer control of the vessel. Resistance will not be tolerated. The message reached Vorath 3 days after the inheritance test was complete. The Valkyrie scientist immediately called an emergency meeting. Taiyang and his crew were summoned from the ship, where they had been learning the controls and systems. When they entered the briefing room, they found it filled with station officials, all looking terrified. "The Dominion is coming," Vorath said without preamble. "War Master Krell personally leads a fleet of 20 ships. They will arrive in 2 days. They demand we give them the Eternal Dawn." "And if we refuse?" Taiyang asked, though he already knew the answer. "Krell destroyed 3 of our defense platforms just to demonstrate what would happen." Vorath pulled up a video. It showed the platforms, massive structures bristling with weapons, exploding in sequence, each one destroyed in a single shot. "He says he will destroy the entire station if we do not comply. 200,000 beings live on Station Veritas. I cannot let them die." "So you want us to give him our ship?" Jiwan said, her voice hard. "Just hand over the most powerful weapon in the galaxy to someone who will use it to conquer everyone else?" "I want you to run," Vorath said tiredly. "Take the ship and flee. Jump to another system. Hide. At least then Krell will not have it." Hana shook her head. "He will still destroy the station. You know that. Men like Krell do not accept defiance." The room fell silent. Outside the windows, Station Veritas continued its normal operations. People lived and worked there, families and children and beings who just wanted to study and learn in peace. And in 2 days, all of that would end unless they gave a warship to a conqueror. "There is another option," Suman said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She looked scared but determined. "We fight." Several people started laughing. One of them stopped when they saw she was serious. "You cannot be serious," an Ashram official said. "You are 5 humans who barely know how to fly that ship. Krell is the greatest military strategist alive. His fleet has conquered 40 systems. It is suicide." "Maybe," Suman admitted. "But I have been studying the ship's database. Dawn recorded thousands of tactical scenarios. Not battles the architects fought, but teaching simulations. The ship was designed to train its crew, to teach them how to fight. The architects did not build the Eternal Dawn for themselves. They built it for us. To teach humans how to fight like humans," Hana said slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "The Dominion wins through perfect strategy, overwhelming force, calculated tactics. But what if we do not fight that way? What if we fight unpredictably?" "That is insane," Vorath said, but his voice lacked conviction. "1 ship against 20, even an architect's ship. The odds are—" "The odds do not matter," Do-Yun interrupted. "When I work in field hospitals, the odds say most of my patients should die. But I save them anyway because I do not give up and I do not follow the rules when the rules would kill someone. Maybe that applies here too." Taiyang sat quietly, listening to his crew. His crew. When had he started thinking of them that way? They had known each other for less than a week. But they had passed the inheritance test together. They had earned the right to control the Eternal Dawn together, and now they were willing to fight together against impossible odds to protect people they did not even know. "If we do this," Taiyang said slowly, "there is no guarantee we will win. We might die. We will probably die." "Probably," Jiwan agreed cheerfully. "But at least we will go down fighting instead of running away. I would rather try and fail than never try at all." The others nodded in agreement. Taiyang looked at Vorath. "Can you evacuate the station? Get people to safety before the battle?" "There is not enough time to evacuate everyone," Vorath said. "But I can move civilians to the far side behind the heaviest shields. If you can draw the battle away from the station—" He trailed off, his 4 eyes studying Taiyang with something that might have been respect. "You really mean to do this?" Yes, Taeyang said. Send a message to Krell. Tell him we accept his challenge. One ship against his fleet. If we lose, the eternal dawn is his. If we win, he leaves and never comes back. Vorath sent the message. Krell's response came within the hour. Accepted. I will enjoy claiming my prize. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Taeyang and his crew barely slept. They spent every moment in the ship, running through Dawn's training simulations, learning the weapon systems, practicing maneuvers. Dawn was a patient teacher, guiding them through scenarios that started simple and became progressively more complex. But there was a problem. Every simulation they ran followed logical patterns. The enemy moved predictably. Standard tactics worked fine. Taeyang knew real battle would not be like that. Krell would adapt, would learn, would exploit any pattern they fell into. On the morning of the second day, as Krell's fleet appeared on the long-range sensors, Suman had an insight. We need to stop thinking of the ship as a machine. Dawn said the architects designed their vessels to bond with crews, to become extensions of the users. What if we try to fly the ship the same way Jiwan flew through the asteroid field, not by thinking, but by feeling? The ship has a neural interface system, Dawn said. I have not activated it because it requires trust. The ship will respond to your instincts, your emotions, your unconscious thoughts. It is not safe. A moment of panic or fear could trigger weapons or shields at the wrong time. But it would let us fight unpredictably, Hana said. Krell could not predict what we would do if we do not even know ourselves until we do it. They looked at each other. It was crazy. It violated every principle of safe ship operation. But nothing about this situation was safe anyway. Do it, Taeyang said. Dawn activated the neural interface. Taeyang felt the ship's systems connect to his mind, his instincts, his emotions. It was overwhelming at first, like trying to move 100 new limbs all at once. But slowly, he adjusted. The others adjusted too. When Jiwan thought about moving, the ship moved. When Doyun felt concern about a damaged system, repairs automatically prioritized. When Suman wondered about an enemy's position, sensors focused there without her touching any controls. Krell's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel right on schedule. 20 warships arranged in perfect formation, weapons charged and ready. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like a fleet of metal sharks. A communication channel opened. Krell's face appeared on the view screen, all scales and cold calculation. "Humans," he said, his voice like grinding rocks. "This is your last chance. Surrender the ship now, and I will let you live. Fight, and I will take it from your wreckage." Taeyang took a deep breath. He felt his crew around him, their minds connected through the ship's neural link. He felt Dawn's ancient systems, eager and ready. He felt fear, yes, but also determination, also hope. "Come and try," Taeyang said. Krell smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I was hoping you would say that." The battle began. The Dominion fleet moved forward in textbook formation, spreading out to surround the eternal dawn. Krell was not taking chances. He would use overwhelming force, attack from all angles, leave no escape route. It was perfect strategy. But the eternal dawn did not move like a normal ship. Jiwan did not plot a course. She felt where the ship should be, and it was there, pulling maneuvers that made no logical sense but worked. Doyun triggered weapons not by targeting but by instinct, hitting weak points the sensors had not even identified. Taeyang rerouted power in ways that violated engineering principles, but created advantages anyway. The first Dominion ship to fire found its shots hitting empty space. The eternal dawn had moved before the shots arrived. Not because they calculated the trajectory, but because Jiwan felt the danger. Their return fire punched through shields that should have held, striking reactor weak points that should have been protected. The Dominion ship exploded. 19 ships remained. Krell's fleet adjusted, tightening formation, concentrating fire. But every time they set up a perfect tactical situation, the Eternal Dawn was somewhere else, doing something unexpected. It was not that the humans were better strategists. They were terrible strategists. But they were unpredictable in ways Krell could not account for. Another ship fell. Then another. The Dominion fleet began making mistakes, ships colliding as they tried to respond to attacks from impossible angles. Krell's perfect formations became liabilities. But Krell was learning. He started to predict their unpredictability, finding patterns in the chaos. He began timing their movements, anticipating their instincts. The Eternal Dawn took hits. Shields flickered. Systems failed. They were losing. The Eternal Dawn shuddered as another blast hit the shields. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. Doyen was working frantically to keep damaged systems online, rerouting power, bypassing broken circuits. They had destroyed 6 of Krell's ships, but 14 remained, and the Dominion fleet was adapting to their tactics. "He is learning our patterns," Ji-won said through gritted teeth as she pulled the ship through another impossible turn. "Every time we do something instinctive, he tracks it. He is building a model of how we think." "Then we need to think differently," Hana said. "But how?" "They were already fighting as unpredictably as possible. What else could they do?" Taeyang felt the ship struggling around them. The neural interface meant he could sense every damaged system, every failing component. They were running out of time. In another few minutes, Krell would have them figured out completely, and then the battle would end. An idea hit him. It was insane. It went against every instinct for self-preservation. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the most unpredictable thing they could do was something that made no tactical sense at all. "Dawn," Taeyang said. "Can you broadcast our command codes to Krell's flagship?" Silence filled the bridge. Everyone stared at him like he had lost his mind. "What?" Suman said. "That would let him board us. That would let him take the ship without even destroying us first." "I know," Taeyang said. "Do it, Dawn." "Are you absolutely certain?" Dawn asked. "This will broadcast our security codes to the enemy. It appears to be surrender." "It is not surrender. It is the most human thing we can do. Trust me." Dawn hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then, "Broadcasting now." On the view screen, they saw Krell's expression change from cold calculation to confusion. His tactical board must be showing him the Eternal Dawn's command codes, an apparent offer of complete surrender. For 3 seconds, the Dominion War Master hesitated, his perfect strategic mind analyzing the trap that must exist. What trick were the humans playing? What weapon were they hiding? Was it a computer virus in the code? A bomb rigged to explode when he came aboard? His fleet paused, holding fire, waiting for their commander's decision. 3 seconds. That was all Taeyang needed. "Ji-won, now!" Ji-won did not think. She felt. The ship lurched forward at impossible speed, closing the distance to Krell's flagship in an instant. They were point-blank range now, close enough to see individual hull plates. Krell's shields were down, lowered in preparation for boarding. His weapons could not fire without hitting his own ship. "Fire everything," Taeyang said quietly. The Eternal Dawn unleashed every weapon it had directly into the flagship's exposed underbelly. Energy beams, missiles, particle cannons, weapons the humans did not even have names for. All of it pouring into the vulnerable ship at a range measured in meters. Krell's flagship exploded. The force of the blast threw the Eternal Dawn backward. Alarms screaming, shields flickering. But they survived. Krell did not. The remaining 13 Dominion ships hung in space, suddenly leaderless. Their perfect coordination fell apart. Some ships turned to flee. Others drifted, as if paralyzed by confusion. Without Krell to tell them what to do, they did not know how to respond to an enemy who had just invited them aboard and then blown up their commander. "Attention Dominion Fleet," Taeyang broadcast on an open channel. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "Your War Master challenged us. We won. Leave now, and we will not pursue. Stay, and we will destroy every ship here." It was a bluff. The Eternal Dawn was barely functioning. Half their systems were offline. Their shields were at 15%. If the Dominion fleet decided to fight, the humans would lose. But Taeyang bet everything on one fact. The Dominion respected strength. They followed whoever was strongest. And Krell was dead. One by one, the Dominion ships jumped to faster-than-light travel. Within 5 minutes, all 13 had fled. The battle was over. Taeyang slumped in his chair, exhausted. Around him, his crew was in similar states. Jiwon had her head in her hands. Doyun was leaning against a console, breathing hard. Sumin was crying quietly, whether from relief or delayed fear or simple exhaustion. Hana reached over and squeezed Taeyang's shoulder, saying nothing. "Well done," Dawn said softly. "That bluff at the end was the most human thing I have ever witnessed. Magnificent." "I thought I was going to die," Taeyang admitted. "The whole time. I was so scared." "Fear is not weakness," Dawn said. "Courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. The architects knew this. That is why they left their ships for species like yours. Species that feel fear and act anyway. Species that take insane risks based on hope rather than calculation. We could never do that." Outside, Station Veritas was cheering. Every communication channel was filled with voices celebrating, thanking them, expressing disbelief that 5 humans in one ship had defeated the Dominion's finest fleet. Vorath sent a message asking if they were all right, his usual cold efficiency replaced by something that sounded like genuine concern. Over the next few hours, as they limped back to the station for repairs, more news came in. The signal the Eternal Dawn had sent when it first activated had reached other Architect ships across the galaxy. And those ships were waking up now, responding to humanity's presence. On colonies dozens of light-years away, humans were reporting that dormant Architect vessels were powering on, doors opening, systems activating. Dozens of ships, maybe hundreds, all waiting for humans to claim them. The galaxy's perception of humanity shifted overnight. No longer were they a minor species, barely worth noticing. They were the inheritors, the ones chosen by the architects to carry their legacy forward. Some species reacted with respect, some with fear, some with jealousy. But none could ignore humanity now. Taeyang did not care about any of that. When they finally docked at Station Veritas, he just wanted to sleep for about a week. But first, there were ceremonies to attend, speeches to endure, questions to answer. Every scientist on the station wanted to interview them. Every official wanted to thank them. It was exhausting. Hana handled most of it, her xenolinguist training making her comfortable with diplomatic language. She gave interviews, explained what had happened, described the inheritance test and the battle. She was good at it in a way Taeyang never could be. 3 days after the battle, Taeyang found himself alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The Eternal Dawn sat in its dock, undergoing repairs. Already human engineers were arriving to study it, to learn from it. Dawn would teach them, just as it had taught Taeyang's crew. "You could be famous," a voice said behind him. Taeyang turned to find Vorath standing there, all 6 arms folded in a gesture that might have been respect. "The human who activated the Eternal Dawn. The human who defeated War Master Krell. People will tell stories about you for centuries." "I do not want to be famous," Taeyang said honestly. "I just want to understand. The architects left so much behind, so many ships, so much technology. What do they expect us to do with it all?" "What do you want to do with it?" Vorath asked. Taeyang thought about that. He looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy full of species and civilizations, mysteries and wonders. I want to explore. I want to learn. The architects left puzzles everywhere. Ships, ruins, technology we do not understand. Each one is a test, maybe. Each one a lesson. Then that is what you should do, Vorath said. Take your crew. Take your ship. Go find answers. The galaxy needs people who ask questions more than it needs heroes. What about you? Are you still angry that a human activated the ship instead of a Valkyrie? Vorath's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Something Tai Yang had learned meant amusement. I was never angry. Frustrated, perhaps. Confused. But I have been studying your species since the activation. Do you know what I learned? Humans succeed not despite their emotions and instincts, but because of them. You make connections we cannot see. You trust feelings we cannot understand. You take risks that defy logic. And that bothers you? No, Vorath said. It teaches me that intelligence comes in many forms. I have spent my life believing pure logic was the highest form of thought, but you proved there is value in chaos, in creativity, in trusting your gut, as you humans say. That is a valuable lesson for any scientist. They stood together in comfortable silence, looking at the stars. After a while, Vorath left, but Taeyang remained. His crew would join him soon. They had already decided to stay together, to keep exploring, to see what other architects' secrets they could uncover. There was so much to learn. More humans would come. More ships would activate. Humanity was stepping onto a galactic stage in a way they never had before. Not as conquerors, not as warriors, but as inheritors of knowledge, as explorers, as people willing to embrace uncertainty and chaos. Taeyang thought about the architects, that mysterious species that had vanished into something beyond physical existence. They could have left their technology for any species, the Valkyrie with their perfect logic, the Ashrim with their telepathy, the Morath with their 4-dimensional perception. Any of them might have made sense, but they left it for humans, for a species that flew by instinct, that repaired things with the wrong tools, that bluffed their way through impossible battles, for a species that embraced imperfection. Dawn, Taeyang said softly into his communicator. Why did the architects really leave their ships for us? What did they see in humanity that made us right for this inheritance? Dawn's voice came back, warm and thoughtful. They saw a species that would use their gifts in ways they never imagined. The architects achieved perfection, but perfection, they learned, is a cage. It limits possibility. It removes wonder. They left their technology for species like yours because you will take it places no logical being would ever think to go. You will make mistakes, yes. You will fail sometimes, but you will also create things, discover things, achieve things that perfect logic never could. That sounds like a lot of pressure. It is also freedom. The galaxy is yours to explore, Taeyang, not to conquer, not to control, just to explore, to learn, to grow. That is all the architects ever wanted, for their inheritors to keep wondering, keep questioning, keep trying new things. Taeyang smiled. He could live with that. Through the observation deck windows, he could see the eternal dawn, its hull still glowing faintly with inner light. His ship, his cruise ship, their home and their vessel of discovery. Tomorrow they would leave Station Veritas. There was a star cluster 3 weeks away that contained 17 architect ruins, all unexplored. Dawn had suggested they start there. More puzzles, more tests, more chances to prove that humans, with all their chaos and creativity, were worthy of the inheritance. But tonight, Taeyang just watched the stars and thought about how strange life was. A week ago, he was a simple engineer cataloging failed experiments. Now he was a ship captain, a fighter, an explorer, all because he reached out and touched something he should not have touched, all because he was human. And humans, he was learning, had a habit of doing things they should not do, of going places they should not go, of succeeding where logic said they must fail. The architects had known that. They counted on it. And somewhere out there, in whatever state of existence they had evolved into, Taeyang hoped they were watching, hoping they were proud of the messy, chaotic, wonderful species they had chosen to inherit their legacy. The spaceship that refused to fly had finally found its captain, and together, they would fly farther than anyone imagined possible.